Welcome to a football show here on the 440 Sports Network. That is Easton Freeze, and I am Braden Gall. I am not filling in for Zach. You are filling in for Zach. We are brought to you by, of course, Sinkers Beverages. You can catch Easton's work over on the Hot Read podcast with Broadway Sports Media and 440 as well. Good to see you, Easton. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Yeah, excited to be here. Did not know. I knew Zach spent the weekend. I don't know if you know this. He was in Thailand caving. Found the same place those soccer kids found a couple years ago, and wouldn't you know it, he got flooded in as well. So that's why he's not here this morning. And I'm here in his stead. They're working on getting him out right now, the Thai authorities. But for the time being, I'm happy to be here.
If you want to jump into the comment section, please do so. Obviously, not the most entertaining football game I've ever seen in my life.
I would say among the least entertaining football games I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was not worth a lot of people's time and effort. And I hope you certainly didn't spend a ton of time and effort trying to get to the stadium on Saturday. I know you did because you got you got a nice little parking pass there. But no, we'll discuss. I think there's some interesting things that came out of this. I think there are some positions that got finalized to some degree, maybe things we already knew, but maybe got cemented over the weekend. There's certainly lots of players that have essentially, I think the cut down date is the 27th, which is next Tuesday.
Yep.
So you go from 90 to 53. The vast majority of those 37 players that will get cut, the vast majority of them sort of already know their fate probably, or at least the coaching staff knows their fate. But there's maybe a handful of them that could still work their way onto the roster. So which position battles are over and which position battles are still ongoing? We'll get to that coming up today on the show as well. So lots of stuff to do. Quarterback, running back, receiver, outside linebacker, Jalen Harrell. Arden Key news as broken by senior Titans defensive line room correspondent Jeffrey Simmons right before the game. We thought there was something kind of fishy going on with Arden Key at practice when I was talking to some folks about the process and what's, how we talked a little bit about it on Thursday's show. Does this mean there's other news coming because it's taking so long for the NFL to deal with the process and then inform the Titans as to what's taking place? Turns out that might actually be the case. D Good in the comments already, JT greater than Easton. That is just rude. That's just rude.
It is rude.
It's very rude.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, JT's a Mets fan, so I'll give him credit for that. But
no, that's the reason why he's definitively not better than Easton, because Easton's not a fan of the Mets.
Well,
you guys should do a Mets pod.
Vote would be the other.
You have nothing else to talk about. You and TD and JT should just do a 2.5 hour cry session over the
Willie Donick, also a huge Mets fan. We
right, that's
4 media members to just discuss Francisco Lindor for an hour and a half. It'll be great.
4 listeners, nobody knows what you're talking about. Yeah.
No, we're huge in Queens though, Easton.
That's right.
There's Sobros, there's Stoney Keeley. There you go, Stoney. Big guy. So D Good says the mustache is immaculate. My wife's the only one who agrees with that, but we'll see.
The wife approves of the mustache.
Oh, it's her choice. It's her choice.
Interesting.
Easton, you've been married. I don't know how long you've been married.
Like 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. Yeah.
You just will do what she says when it comes to appearance. Sure. Like this is
when I try something like that, I get sent back into the bathroom and say, "Go pick up a razor." So I'm envious of you and the freedom that your wife gives you with your facial choices.
I'm telling you, it's not my freedom. It's I don't have the freedom. If she were to say shave it, I would just do it. But she says no. I like it. I said, all right, well then I'm going to keep going. She says I look like Sturgill Simpson, which I'm not sure is a huge compliment. And the white guy, the gringo from Narcos, an old Netflix show about very good. Fair. A very good Netflix show, by the way, about the drug cartels in Mexico. So, yes, Donnie, thank you for the compliment. I do appreciate it. You can blame my wife for that. So, before we do any of that, however, Sinkers Beverages, our great, amazing local sponsor here in East Nashville. Of course, they sponsor football and other F words, as well as a football show. They have been the 3-time defending liquor store champion in the city of Nashville. Their sister store, Bluegrass, has been serving the Hendersonville market for over 50 years. These are 2 businesses that do everything they can to give you the best possible experience and products in the market. That's what you want from your businesses. That's the goal. Do the best job for their customers. And so far, their customers have voted them the best liquor store in the city 3 straight years. You can search Uber Eats. Just search Sinkers Beverages, Easton, and just you stepped all over it, just like
you said my name, and I was ready to go.
You have to wait until I set you up.
Hang on. Try it again.
Try this again. Easton, just search Uber Eats,
right?
Search Sinkers, and they'll deliver the booze directly to your house.
They drive, so you can drink.
Nice. Well done. Excellent. Thanks for coming on. That's all we needed from you. Talk to you next week.
Hey, guys, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you later.
Go to Sinkers Beverages and make sure you go check out the Hot Read podcast. There you go. Stoney wants to see my badge number.
Who's your supervising officer? Can I speak to him?
Well, we're having some police accountability issues in this city right now, so I don't want to give you my lieutenant's digits.
That's right. Okay.
I will say, I think was it oh God, what's the guy's name that was in the Chips remake? He's got his own podcast. It was quite funny, actually. I enjoyed it. Like I trust you. His partner on Chips, I think, had a masturbation problem and had to go do it in public at all times. So it was just absolutely, I mean, it's one of those movies where you're like, I don't know why I keep going back to watch this, but it's so damn funny every time I watch it. So go check it out. The Chips remake, almost as good as Officer Farva, which of course is Super Trooper, and watch Hot Rod too, not to be confused. Also a very stupid and funny movie. Okay. I'm sure Sinkers Beverages appreciated that. So on Thursday, we floated the idea, and there were some folks, and I think you were there too, when we were chatting on the sidelines about like, hey, what's the deal with the Arden Key suspension? What else could be going on here? There's a couple of things that could be going on. It could be getting overturned, which is a very unlikely probability standpoint statistically, considering the situation in NFL with its performance enhancing their policies don't generally lead to things getting overturned. They might have another piece of the puzzle out there waiting that they are ready to go with, which is why Arden Key might have been getting first team reps. And as it turns out, there was something sort of fishy, not in like a bad way, but that it sounds like he might not get suspended at all, that it might get over. Jeffrey Simmons reporting just before the game on Saturday night, of course, that Arden Key that it's been overturned. That has not been officially passed along to the team. And until the NFL communicates with the Tennessee Titans, Brian Callahan and anyone else for the Titans cannot say anything about this. So at time of taping, they have not yet heard anything. So I am assuming that Jeffrey Simmons has a pretty good source, a.k.a. Arden Key.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a limb and say he's right about that. I'm going to double, triple down on that one.
That's what I'm guessing. But ultimately, it would make sense, Easton, for this to have taken this long if it was going to be appealed and then reduced back down to nothing. And that's what makes it make sense that there's nothing happening. If you package that with Jalen Harrell's performance on Saturday evening and the good camp that he's got, I think you start to see, all right, this is a major area of concern for this team. I still have my doubts about their ability to put some like actual game wreckers on the field to rush the passer. Right. I mean, Simmons and Sweat can do it in a different type of way, but they don't have that dude. And Landry is very good, but he is not that dude, and there's not a lot of depth behind him. But if all of a sudden Arden Key's available for all 17 games, if all of a sudden Jalen Harrell looks like he's clearly made the roster at this point and is going to be a contributing member, at least a depth piece, you could start to say, all right, maybe I'm a little bit more comfortable with this edge group that's going to try to get after the quarterback.
Yeah, a lot here. Number one, it's a big deal. And not to be a total Debbie Downer, I was talking to some people when we first heard this from Jeffrey Simmons, and my reaction was, I think people are going to be lulled into too much of a sense of confidence with this edge room with Arden Key coming back. Like the going theory is Arden Key is back. The Titans no longer desperately need another starter at edge. When I think in reality, it's Arden Key is back. The Titans still kind of need another starter at edge, but he's better than what you had. So that's an improvement for sure. And it makes the depth situation way less concerning. I do want to push back a little bit on the timing thing being what made it fishy. A lot of people on the internet kind of beclowned themselves over this, especially taking an opportunity to make fun of Paul Kaharski, who originally reported that he was facing a suspension, demonstrating they didn't quite understand how this works or know all the facts. So as I'm blurry here, just take my word for it. I don't know what's going on. I still think you're very your mustache is not as good as mine, but you're still very handsome, so it's okay. Yeah, I don't know it'll fix itself. The situation can take this long, and like with Danico Autry, the league has similarly not made any form of official press release announcement on him. The argument is it was weird that it took so long for anybody to acknowledge it on a national level. And so folks would point to, well, the league didn't, they did say something about Danico Autry. Every national outlet ran with it. That's because Danico Autry put out a letter and said, I did this, it's coming. If Arden Key had done the same thing, you would have seen that on NFL Network as well. The league really, it's a lot of red tape, right? They drag their feet on these things. And so it's not uncommon to hear of a suspension and then it be a couple weeks before that's officially released. People need to understand he was in fact facing a suspension. That was not an incorrect report by Paul Kaharski. It wasn't just everybody say, well, only Paul had it. No, if you go read Teron Davenport's original report, he confirmed it with a second league source of his own. ESPN, the news desk at ESPN confirmed it with a team source. So it happened. And then Arden Key won his appeal, which according to Taylor Lewan, and I'm just trusting him on this because I don't care enough to go and look it up
that
myself.
Sounds like a smart life decision.
Thank you. He said that only one, and well, this is something he's dealt with before. He said only one player in league history has ever won their appeal before Arden Key won his appeal. So he's now doubled that statistic. I'm super curious to find. We were talking about this on the Hot Read podcast yesterday. What do you think the story is going to be? And, or are we ever going to really hear the story as to why, like what was the difference in his situation that allowed for him to get an appeal? Because all my family members would text me and be like, well, he must have proven that he didn't know. And no, that's most of the PED suspensions is guys that didn't know. No one's actively trying to, I mean, you have to be a real moron to try to cheat with PEDs in the NFL. Usually it's guys not looking closely enough at the ingredients list on their latest supplement. So I don't know if it was like a team doctor gave it to him and there's a loophole, or he convinced the league to take the ingredient that he got flagged for off the list. I'm curious to know if we'll ever know.
I don't. My thought is there will be one story by Arden Key that is put out. There might be another story by the NFL that is put out, and then we may never know what the exact actual thing that happened. Like, what is it? Was it like a test that, you know, some guy walking through the hallway dropped a test and like it got contaminated? Like, there might be some sort of legal stipulation here, but again, ultimately, I think it's largely irrelevant in terms of what actually happened.
That was JT's theory, that they just swapped the urine samples, and there's going to be another edge in the league reportedly facing a suspension suddenly this week.
Danico Autry samples are everywhere.
That's right.
Paul's report is correct, that because what happens is the league does not tell the team that there is a pending suspension and or appeal taking place. That they tell the player, and then it's up to the player if they want to tell the press or the team. I'm assuming almost every player immediately informs the coaching staff or the front office that this is what's happened.
That's a good way to get fired if you don't, I think.
Yeah, and so what happens is the league gets something triggers the warning. The league then tells the player, and then the player appeals with his agent and or his legal representation, and then the process takes place generally fairly quickly, and then it's all happens behind a closed door, so that it's not, you know, it doesn't go to the employer, it doesn't go to the press. And then it gets confirmed or denied or whatever, and then they just sort of announce it, and they inform the team that X player has been suspended for X games. Again, talking with people around the Titans, like the reason they couldn't comment and the reason that they thought it was taking so long is that this is all behind a closed door, and it's between the player and the league. And again, as Paul said to us on the sidelines, and as Taylor Lewan said, like the statistics of that being overturned were extremely improbable. But it's good news. I agree with your main point, and that's, I think, the ultimate point here. Jalen Harrell could be developing into a serviceable depth piece. Seems like he is, which is a nice turn of events in an otherwise extremely boring football game. Arden Key is not going to be suspended for 6 games. He's going to play for all of the games that he's available, but he still might just be a situational pass rusher, as told to us by the head football coach.
Yep.
Ultimately, their number one need next year in the draft, if they are picking in the top 10, is going to be a pass rusher. Nothing has changed with that. But does it mean that Denard Wilson might be able to do a little bit more in the first few weeks of the season with Arden Key, or a little bit more at the end of the season with Jalen Harrell developing? Certainly, that's a positive step. And at a position where you need a lot of steps forward, you take any steps you can get. And at this point, it's 1 or 2 steps forward. You still need like 5 or 6 more, I guess, is the analogy. So I don't know what the analogy actually is, but that's my analogy. So
there are more steps to be taken, is the bottom line.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So quickly, I want to start with sort of what did the starting lineup tell you? Because I think it's interesting that my theory on Thursday about Malik Willis is that this was his last chance, that they were going to give him the start. And one of the things I did not say on Thursday that I kicked myself for not saying is that you also want Mason Rudolph to practice coming off the bench. That's what his role is going to be.
Yep.
And so you want him to train like a number 2, to start the game like a number 2, and to come off the bench like a number 2 if and when you need him to do that. And he did it very, very well. The offense came to life the first time he got into the game. They went right down the field and scored a touchdown. And then, of course, he led 2 technically game-winning drives in the fourth quarter. So I think Mason Rudolph has done everything you could possibly want out of a player to clearly be the number 2. I don't think he's ever not been the number 2. But that's maybe not the case with the running back position, right? So it's maybe the opposite with the running back position. So what do you make of the starting lineup decision-making where it was Julius Chestnut, Mason Kinsey, Jaquan Jackson, Malik Willis, David DMR, and then Nick Westbrook-Akine was the starting skill players. We can go through the offensive line if you want to: Ojukwu, Rupchich, Brunskill, Harrison, and Duncan. What does that starting lineup tell you about where those players are within their position battles?
Yeah, and I could go in any direction here with any of these position groups. I'll just pick one off the board and we can start there. Let's do the quarterbacks because that's I think the logical place to start. Like you said, I think this is pretty cut and dry. The last chance corral was Saturday night for Malik Willis. He didn't quite pass the test. I will say I don't think people need to lose sight of the fact that he has improved. Like us talking the past couple weeks about how Malik Willis looks better. That part remains true. He looked even better than he did in the games on the practice field. A big part of the reason why I think he's definitively the quarterback 3 is because a lot of that improvement we saw at practice, he just wasn't able to really pull over into the games. It was kind of back to the same old Willis that we're used to seeing. And with Mason Rudolph, it's not like he's lighting the world on fire out there. It's pretty boring, but it's safe. And it's kind of like we were talking about how to define this on the Hot Read podcast yesterday. It's kind of like the Supreme Court's definition of pornography, where it's like you're not exactly sure how to define it, but you know it when you see it. Yeah. When you're just sitting there enjoying the football product and you're watching Malik Willis, it is a lot of frustration and nervousness. And when you're watching Mason Rudolph, it's boring, but you trust him implicitly a little bit to get the ball down the field. We kind of saw that in the first half of the game. Malik Willis toiling with pretty much the exact same set of starters for 20, 25 minutes. Mason Rudolph comes in and immediately leads a 10-play, 70-yard drive with the same guys. Nothing else really. If you changed the running backs, you got actually a worse running back out there, in my opinion. But
that's right,
like right. Yeah. And it did not matter. He was able to get down there and score. So, I think the bottom line is when Malik Willis, when you're sitting there watching the game, thinking if we have to roll this out on a real Sunday afternoon, if it's Malik Willis, that feels like a white flag. It feels like you're screwed. And with Mason Rudolph, if you have to roll him out there, you feel like you have at least a puncher's chance to maybe eke out a game. And that's what you want in a backup quarterback. So I think the argument is he probably kind of always was the backup. And this is just finally solidifying the fact that, yes, Mason Rudolph, the guy you went and signed to be your backup in free agency, he's your backup.
Yeah. And I think ultimately my takeaway from the starting lineup generally is that it is position by position and player by player from a strategy standpoint. It is very clear that Willis was given the opportunity to show what he could do, knowing that he's the guy as a starter, knowing that, and Mason Rudolph needs to be taking reps as the number 2. It's muscle memory. You can, talk about habitual winning, winning habits, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Levis is going to start. He's the starting quarterback. So Rudolph is not going to get those reps, but he also needs to practice being a number 2. But I would say with Julius Chestnut, it might be different. It took a while before they put Hassan Haskins in the game. And if it is, in fact, a battle between those two, Chestnut and Haskins for the final spot, Jabari Small now in concussion protocol, seems like that's the end of his preseason. He's had a decent camp. I think he's a nice player. I think he's a practice squad guy. Haskins is the far better special teamer. He's a very good receiver and good blitz guy in terms of the running back position. But Chestnut gets all of the run in the first half and all of the carries, and they give him the football. So what's the deal there? Well, Andrew Rupchich, for example, let's keep bouncing around. We know he and Brunskill have gotten rave reviews from the coaching staff and are clearly the backup left guard and center. Mm-hmm. Well, they get in there as the starters, and they get a ton of run. So Jaquan Jackson seems like he's solidified a spot. Him and Mason Kinsey are in there. Are they in there for the same reason that Nick Westbrook-Akine is in there? No, it's different because Westbrook-Akine, we know his spot on the roster. So every single one of these pieces, like, is Duncan out there because they're trying to give him a chance to win the spot? Bingo. Or is he out there because he's already got the spot? I think that's what's really interesting about the offense is it's almost different for every player in position.
Yeah, half the guys were out there taking a test, taking their exam, and half the guys were out there practicing because they already passed the exam. Like they were already doing their rounds as a board approved nurse.
So who's who?
Right. So who's who? That's the thing. Let's cross off the wide receivers because you mentioned it there. I hated how much NWI played in that game. It was bothering me watching him not just play, but like run brutal crossing routes and get laid out, catching really difficult hospital balls across. Like it was real football he was playing, and it was a whole half of football, and it was bothersome. And I was like, get this guy off the field. They did eventually. I asked Brian Callahan about that because a number of fans were surprised. Wow, NWI getting a lot of run. No Traylon Burks out there. We got pretty insightful clarity from him the past couple of days when I was asking him that at the press conferences about how the Titans view Traylon Burks as a direct backup to DeAndre Hopkins in the X position. He is a boundary receiver pretty exclusively. That's how they're going to use him. You can disagree with that. I would be interested to see them move him around a little bit. But like I said on the show yesterday,
he can play in the slot.
I kind of would prefer to see him be a big slot like he was in college with so much success. But I will say with this offensive coaching staff, there's a level of implicit trust I have in them from a scheme perspective to at least trust them for now and see what it looks like.
They also have 4 slot receivers. So,
and that's a great point. They have no shortage of slot receivers, and they have guys like NWI who, like Brian Callahan clarified to me yesterday, will primarily be the flanker position, but he has versatility and he's going to play some in the slot and some outside. Like you mentioned, Jaquan Jackson, this was evident to me, and I would imagine you and most of us after the joint practices. He is wide receiver 6. There's not really a competition anymore. He's the punt returner. He's the dude. I found it interesting, and maybe I'll run this by you. We became pretty certain of the fact that this team's going to keep 5 or 6 receivers last week because Brian Callahan kept saying when we have 6 receivers on game day that are active, which seems like a pretty direct clue. And yet, before the game on Saturday, and then in the press conference following the game, he went out of his way, Brian Callahan did, to mention Mason Kinsey by name twice, unprompted. And JT and I were sitting in the stand Saturday night in the third quarter, bored out of our minds by this game. So we pick up our roster.
So you were the 2. Okay.
We pick up the roster and we're just doing a crack shot at the 53, like who's in, who's out.
Yeah.
And we get through and we start counting them up and it's like just 45 guys here who we got to get some other players on this team. Who wants to join the squad? It gets really thin at the bottom. And so while I am skeptical and still blurry again, good grief.
Yeah, it just happened. It didn't.
I don't know.
The internet got upset that you were still in the stands in the third quarter. There you go. See there,
right,
now
that's
you're
right.
back.
Go home. There are going to be some guys that at the bottom get in just because they're not trying to check a box. Like, I mean, Brian Callahan said this explicitly yesterday. At the very bottom of the roster, we're not going to be looking for, we really need a 5th safety. We really need a 6th cornerback. It's going to be at who the best players are, regardless of their position. And so maybe they see Mason Kinsey, who is really the last guy at the bottom that offers any inside-outside versatility, is a legitimate option in special teams and as a returner. Maybe they try to slot him in as a 7th guy just from a we need bodies, like we got to fill out the roster standpoint. I'm allowing like a 70.5% chance that happens, but otherwise I think the 6 are pretty set.
Hopkins, Ridley, Boyd, Burks, NWI, Jaquan Jackson, I think are all but locked into their 6 spots, if not already locked into their spots. Kearis Jackson, some updates here on injuries. Kearis Jackson with a knee injury. Looks like he's out for the foreseeable future. That probably means, much like Jabari Small, that he's not making the roster. Not that he was going to, but that's there. Kyle Phillips, according to Brian Callahan, still out for the foreseeable future for at least a week or 2, maybe. Maybe he's back, but the hamstring is an issue there. DeAndre Hopkins, there was a report that, of course, and this was from Callahan, that they are hopeful that he will be available for the season opener. Number one, don't rush him back. The first game of the season against the Chicago Bears will not decide how good or bad the season is. If this team is fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the year and they miss the playoffs by 1 game and they lose to the Bears because DeAndre Hopkins did or didn't play, then we can have that discussion then. But in the short term, you need him healthy for the rest of the season to develop your quarterback, not in the game against the Chicago Bears. By the way, the Chicago Bears defense, pretty good. Damn good secondary. So that's Josh Wiley also as a pass catcher, just lump into this group. He was in concussion protocol, should be out of that this week and maybe will play. As Callahan said, all of the offensive starters are looking to play for at least 3 series this game. So an interesting strategy with like, hey, get their feet wet in game 1. Nobody touched the field in game 2. And then we're going to give you a little bit more run in game 3. Certainly a different strategy than we saw in the NFL 5-10 years ago with 4 games and et cetera. So that's sort of the update on the injuries from a receiving core standpoint. Kinsey has had a good camp, And I know we've said that before, and I know we've talked about it. He's felt like a more confident player. He's more confident in his own skin. He's making plays in the games. He makes plays in camp. He's been running with the ones in red zone against Seattle.
He's a leader too, by the way. People don't really. He's leading the drills. He's breaking it down, leading into the preseason game. He's a good locker room guy.
I don't know if he's like great at anything. I don't know if he's a good punt returner or a good slot receiver or a good outside receiver or a good leader. Like, I don't know, but he's put in the work, and you're right. Eventually somebody has to make the team. I could see it being Mason Kinsey, but my instincts are probably not, but I could see it. I think it's maybe tied to DeAndre Hopkins' health, honestly.
Yes, that could be a part of it as well. I understand people hearing Mason Kinsey as a 7th receiver. No way. But then when you do the work and put together the roster, you get to a point where it's like, okay, Mason Kinsey or Anthony Kendall, Mason Kinsey or JoJo Doman. And suddenly the math is like, well, obviously it's Mason Kinsey. It's not really close. Who's more talented there?
Matthew Brown or Jackson as like safety 5 or 6, or Mason Kinsey without DeAndre Hopkins. I just think the receiver's a smarter decision if Hopkins is not playing in games 1 or 2 or whatever. So I do think, and I think you posted this on the sewer there, I do think that all 6 of those slots are filled. 1 through 6 are done. I think that's a finished battle. I think Jaquan Jackson, and I actually was going to go back and pull up a football show from like the Monday after the draft, because Zach, for the life of him, and he's not hiding this or anything, like could not understand why and what was the strategy behind Jackson. And I couldn't either. And that's fair. I get that. But my analysis of Jackson at the time was, this is a super heady, super smart football IQ guy that can return kicks. He's been injured, and that's a concern. But like the analysis was pretty clear. Like, this is a speedy slot guy who can return kicks and has really high level football smarts. And I think it's a compliment that Brian Callahan was like, yeah, he's like an old man in a young man's body. And he's just he's gotten better and better each week of camp. Him and Treylon Burks are probably the 2 best receivers during joint practice. And he's made plays every game, each of the 2 preseason games. He's all but earned the last slot. And oh, by the way, this front office is invested in him over Mason Kinsey or Kyle Phillips or Kyaris Jackson or anybody else that they've got on there. And by the way, Bryce Oliver, I think he's going to be a nice player down the road. I
like Bryce Oliver. He's got juice. Yeah, I want to do it
down the road.
Yes, down the road. Give him a year to develop in the practice squad. I want to do a term paper on this. Like, not actually, but I want to figure this out, and I'm not sure I ever will. In terms of draft strategy and evaluating guys from a scouting standpoint in March or in February or whenever, Jaquan Jackson's kind of the exact opposite case of what they did in the 7th round with James Williams and Jalen Harrell. We were talking about this on the Hot Read podcast yesterday, and Brian Callahan made this point himself to me when I asked him about Jalen Harrell and how quickly he's come along. He said, listen, he came from a blue blood program where he was coached at like a professional level. He played in massive spots. He played alongside NFL caliber talent. Like, not super surprised when those guys work out in the NFL. And it's the meme, it's the bell curve meme where it's like the moron, the average dude, and then the genius on one end, and the moron's like, duh, draft the blue blood guy. He played at a big school. And then the guy in the middle is like, well, actually, the analytics tell you to. And then the genius is like, no, just draft the blue blood guy from the big school. Yeah. That was the way they went in the 7th round and those last kind of flyer picks. But with Jaquan Jackson, and this is why Nick Suss, who I talked to about him very early on, and Nick's point was, oftentimes when guys from small schools in college weren't particularly great players in college, they aren't going to be particularly great players in the NFL. And sometimes there are enigmas. And I'm not saying Jaquan Jackson's already a good NFL player by any means, but he's trending in that direction. And so I just want to know what these scouts see in a guy who, again, on paper, you just look at his college resume. There's a reason why when he was drafted in the 6th round, pretty much everybody, even folks like me who spend 3 months digging into hundreds of prospects, are like, who is this guy? They saw something. They knew something about this guy. You know, we knew Tyke Tolbert went down there for the pro day and worked in person with them. He saw something that said, this is somebody worth taking a risk on. And I want to know what that is.
Willie Fritz is the head coach at Tulane.
Okay.
And Willie Fritz, who's now the head coach at Houston, has been a long-time talent developer at the lower levels. He was in Georgia coaching at a small mid-major school, got the Tulane job, and got Tulane as I think the only group of 5 team in college football to go to back-to-back New Year's 6 games, develop Tajay Spears, and now has the Houston job. I guarantee you In 2 years from now, we are going to see Houston players getting drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, and they are going to be better than their draft stock.
Working out. Yeah.
He is like, and it's honestly, it's the opposite of James Williams, because your theory on their strategy is interesting. And I really like this because Jalen Harrell is one type of player, a fundamentally sound, very coachable blue blood guy who played for Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh, who are both now NFL assistants and former NFL assistants, playing in an NFL style defense with NFL talent around him. He wasn't the best and brightest star on the team, but very smart, savvy, probably overachieves his talent, right? Jaquan Jackson is different in that he did not play for a blue blood, but he played for a great coach, smaller, didn't have the production on paper, got hurt a lot, and that was part of the production problems.
Sure.
And then James Williams is even the third option, which is elite 5-star recruit, number 1 safety prospect in America with extraordinary physical skills. Didn't get much coaching at all at Miami because the coaching staff doesn't know when to kneel the effing football to win a game. And so there's like 3 different types of player at the end of the draft. And I think all 3 of them, I think, have proven that they have a future with the team. Don't know what that is or if they're starters, but like they all seem like they've got a path to develop into players that the Titans can use as either depth pieces or contributors. But to me, it's Willie Fritz. Willie Fritz is a brilliant developer of talent, a brilliant college football coach, and is extremely good at his job. And I think that's where Spears and Jackson have developed. Michael Pratt is going to take the backup quarterback job in Green Bay from Sean Clifford. Side note here, just for a second. Group thread at my family's household last night. I had to explain to people how gross it is that Andre Dillard is on the team.
Yeah, they didn't understand the gravity of the situation.
I was like, guys, he is quote unquote earning the swing tackle job as the backup, and I'm like, this is not good.
Right. It's like a horror movie when it's revealed to you that who the bad guy is, and he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and then he spends the next 40 minutes of the movie amongst the good guys, and you're screaming, no one can hear you. He's right there. The murderer is inside the house.
Yes, so I love my brother, but like these guys, he's like, they're all like, well, but he's a former 1st-round pick. He's got to be a good athlete. Somebody had to like him at some point. I'm like, gave up 12 sacks last year.
Yeah.
Like I spoke to him multiple times. Certainly a lovely person, but just not good at blocking in the NFL, which is sort of the job. So, and I think if my memory serves correct, I want to say he was owed $10 million. They cut him and they saved $3 million.
Correct.
So it was worth $7 million, I believe, in the dead cap money for him not to block people or not block people.
In related news, Dennis Daly cut today by the Arizona
Cardinals. I saw that. Yeah. So.
And apropos of nothing, the Tennessee Titans really could use some churning on their tackle depth chart.
All right, well, let's get to so we've spent enough time on Jackson here. By the way, go to Sinkers, please. Support good local businesses. Check out Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Sign up for the BOB program at Bluegrass, which is Best of Bluegrass. That's their customer appreciation group. The In Crowd is what it's called at Sinkers Beverages. Sign up for the In Crowd. That is the way you will get access to like early allocations for high-end bourbons, stuff that does not hit the floor. They will send you emails. They'll make sure you get allocation drops. Like you'll know when the best stuff is coming if you join those 2 groups. So make sure you join those groups. I promise you, they track all your stuff and they're like, hey, we got this coming in, or hey, I think you really like this, or they just do a really good job of taking care of their customers. So make sure you go. Make sure you go sign up for the In Crowd at Sinkers Beverages and support good local businesses. Let's go to the offensive line then, because again, Ojukwu, Rupchich, Brunskill, Harrison, and Duncan was the starting 5 in the preseason game. That does look like it's been the backup offensive line for the entirety of camp.
Yep.
I am curious how many of those 5 make the team in your opinion.
JT and I yesterday spent a good chunk of our show on this, and we're both going to do just a preview of the Hot Read podcast tomorrow, just like a dueling 53-man roster, making our final picks. And we're both pretty certain.
Sexy. That's sexy.
It's a highbrow, large reach, trying to hit the largest possible demographic with that one. We're both pretty confident that when we find out who makes a 53-man roster, our projections will be like 4 or 5 players off, and 3 or 4 of them will be offensive linemen. Because beyond the starters on this team, it is a real crapshoot. They don't have any semblance of depth, really. Like outside of Dan Brunskill, who is fine. Rupchich is fine. They don't have any kind of tackle depth whatsoever. I think that it's going to be Just a matter of who Bill sees more potential in. And I think some of the younger guys on this team, like Cole Spencer, is somebody that me and JT and Zach and Sony have talked a lot about, is a UDFA rookie they brought in, gave him a decent chunk of money. Bill Callahan spent a lot of time on him reportedly pre-draft. I think guys like him may have a better shot than they otherwise would to make the roster, just because there's perceived upside, room for development with somebody like him, as opposed to, I won't throw anybody under the bus, but any of these guys that are older, known commodities. I don't know. I think of those, to answer your original question, of those guys who makes the team, I'll be surprised if Brunskill doesn't make the team. I'll be surprised if Rupchich doesn't make the team. With both of those tackles, man, I don't know. I think one of Ojukwu and Daly, goodness. One of Ojukwu and Jalen Duncan makes the team. Right now, I would lean Duncan, which is not something I would have said a couple weeks ago, but I think right now I'd lean Duncan. And that's primarily based on the preseason performance and one offhand comment made by Bill Callahan where he's like, I really like that kid.
By the way, I keep saying Harrison. I mean Simmons. I don't know why I don't know why I keep calling him Lachavious Simmons Harrison. Glory Day Sports says, could Spencer be kept over Rupchich at this point? I think Rupchich is like,
keep them both.
I think if you're asking me who's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in order, I think it's Brunskill and Rupchich might actually, and then pick
that's
a
6, 7.
Yeah, and then a tackle's probably 8. So I don't know if that's Duncan or Ojukwu or Christian or who, but I feel very comfortable that Rupchich. I mean, Rupchich might be the starter at some point this year. I mean, I think he and Raidens are in a battle. I don't know about Simmons. I thought Simmons had some really good running plays in the game on Saturday, where he was clearly the guy that was driving sort of the pile, kicking, making holes for whoever it was. I think Duncan has if I'm Bill Callahan and I want a moldable ball of clay, I think Duncan has the most ability.
Agreed.
So I was talking with somebody last week, and I said it on Thursday show, I think Ojukwu might be the 10th guy and the first guy out. I think.
So you think they keep 9 then?
are they going to keep 10?
I think there's room for it. It'll be 9 or 10. I won't be surprised either way.
So the question is then, is it
he's on the bubble? I agree with you there.
Is it not Ojukwu, and then it's going to be Christian Spencer? Like, are those the two that are fighting for that 10th spot with?
Or you're not even considering Leroy Watson at this point?
I assume this is what I'm saying. Like,
I know there's a lot of unknowns. That's what I'm saying. When we find the final 3-man roster out, everybody's X's on their sheet will be linemen. It's going to be the linemen. We don't know. And the answer that actually matters is no matter who it is, it's rough and it's not great.
I would guess Rupchich and Brunskill are locks at 6 and 7. I think you're probably going. Yes, I agree, Stoney. I thought Simmons was one of the better blockers on Saturday. I thought he was. I thought 73 was one of the better blockers. I think Duncan makes the team.
I think so too.
So if it's Simmons, Duncan,
that's 9.
That's 9. I think it is down to Spencer, and I would put Simmons on there too. I think it's Spencer, Christian, Ojukwu, and Watson for a spot,
fighting for a spot. Yeah,
that's what I would guess. Which is the
pouring one out for Brian Dooley, who was not even being mentioned, who did have one really impressive block on Saturday.
That's true. But those 4 guys are, if you're asking like who's got to do the most work this week in camp, it's one of those 4 guys. Yep. And then there's some other positions we'll get to, especially on the defensive side as well. I do think Kinsey is in this group of players that has to have a great final week if he wants to get in, if he wants to crack the roster.
Finish strong.
I think there's, I guess it's Julius Chestnut at this point, but I wouldn't really be surprised at either of the choices. I don't think it's 4.
Oh, I would. So I'll be floored if it's not Chestnut as running back 3. Personally, okay. I think I wrote about that. I have an article out at Broadway Sports Media right now if people are interested. I wrote about 8. I was deeming them roster realities at this point, things that I think are already set in stone. We'll spend the next 9 days arguing about them, but we don't need to. They're already set. I think one of those things is Julius Chestnut as running back 3. I'm leaving room at pretty much every position for them to keep a guy that you weren't expecting just because of how thin this entire team is at the bottom.
Yeah.
So could they justify Hassan Haskins for special teams prowess alone as running back 4? I could see it. Again, I'm leaving like a 7.5% chance it happens, but otherwise it's Chestnut. And Chestnut deserves it, I think. I don't think it's really a debate for me.
I think they're both solid players that bring different things to the table. I have no problem with either choice, honestly, but I agree with Chestnut. Zach in the comments here just tuned in, but Brian Dooley was the best tackle on Saturday easily, and that is terrifying.
So does that get out of the cave then? Welcome back, Zach.
Yeah, it means he's no longer searching for the small lost child, JT, who was drowning.
He left JT in there. That's brutal.
DMR and Odukoya, I think both of those two guys have to have a huge week and a half here before next Tuesday's cut down. I don't know.
So I don't disagree in general. They both need big weeks. Do you view them on the same plane? Of all of the, maybe they keep one more than we think categories that we're talking about here, if I had to bet on one of them, it's tight end 4. And I wrote about that in my article as well. I think they keep 4 tight ends at this point. Part of that is because of how, folks don't realize this. DMR leads the team in the preseason, all pass catchers. He leads them through 2 preseason games. He has I think 5 catches for nearly 70 yards. They also have made it pretty clear with their deployment in these 2 games, they are bifurcating their tight end position. Guys that play the Y, just play the Y. Guys that play the F, just play the F. And right now it is Van Nett and Wiley as your Y, which is that inline traditional seam runner tight end for folks that are curious. And then the F is that move. Brian Callahan called it the adjuster position. It's going to be playing fullback, move, tight end. And that's Chigakonko right now. And if it's just those 3, you're 1 deep at the F tight end position. I think the most high-profile guy playing that F besides Chig is DMR. He's looked really good in the preseason. I don't see any reason why, if you get down to number 47, 48, and you're kind of just drawing straws, DMR would be the first straw I reach for.
My instinct is, and it's really, if they're dead even, you take DMR because you can keep Odukoya on the international slot,
which I hate for Thomas personally. But
I agree. I think Odukoya is the better player right now today. I think he has been better in camp. And I think they're having
even.
I
love Thomas Odukoya.
I'm not. They're not that far, but I think if I had to, I thought Odukoya has done better job and sort of more complete, just all around game. But again, I agree. We're talking about the 52nd and 53rd ranked players on the team, or 49 and 50, or 53 and 54. We don't know. I agree that tight end 4 now seems like something they're going to keep, especially with Wiley's head injury. I think Vanette, who was it in the comments there? D Good says would rather have DMR over Vanette. They just do different things. I think Vanette is a very good blocker, and they've got to have that piece on the lineup. I don't think DMR is there yet. I think Odukoya is the better blocker and equally as athletic. Maybe not as natural as the move tight end like you're talking about, but I think he can play both of them, and that's why I lean Odukoya. But I think that's 2 guys that have to have huge weeks. Let's go to the defense here. There's not a whole lot to talk about from the interior defensive line standpoint and from the safety standpoint. Those 2 positions feel like they're sort of set here. We talked about Jalen Harrell in the outside linebacker slot, so let's talk about the inside linebacker slot here, because Campbell and Reese got the starts and they got a lot of reps early in this game. They have been the 2 of the guys that all feel like the same player behind Murray and Dr. Jack. I think Campbell and Reese have been the ones they wanted. They wanted to see these 2 guys. And of course, Otis Reese in concussion, it looks like he's going to be in concussion protocol. So that might be a thing that separates him. Everyone seems to be, did you put Chance Campbell on your lock into the roster? Because everyone seems to be talking that way. And I'm not sure how I feel about that.
So that was one of my roster realities I wrote about. Yes, I am locking it in. Chance Campbell is not just on the roster; he's linebacker 3. Nobody else is differentiating themselves in that group. And you're right. It's the starting 2, which it's funny we keep referring to these 2 guys at the top, and Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons, as set in stone, they're dramatically better. I'm not certain of that personally.
I think Murray is he's the number 1 middle linebacker on the team, I think, by a pretty clear margin. Everyone else,
that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Everyone else, and I'm not saying he's great. I'm just saying he's the best.
Right.
Everybody else to me is the same, roughly speaking.
So if we are going to go ahead, let's just assume, because we know this is the case, those 2 of the starters, we'll move them to the side. The next 4 guys, like you said, all kind of feel the same in Chance Campbell, Otis Reese, James Williams, and then Cedric Gray is a different conversation. He doesn't feel the same, but he's certainly in the conversation because he's a 4th round draft pick.
Well, and I was going to lump Gray and Williams kind of together as the 2 rookies that aren't going to play for 2 different reasons.
No, I disagree. I think if I'm ranking the depth chart, you've got the starters. I think Campbell is easily linebacker 3, and right now I think James Williams is easily linebacker 4. And I like Otis Reese, and I am intrigued by Cedric Gray. I think the coaching staff really likes him. He continues to flash crazy potential. I asked Brian Callahan about him yesterday, and his biggest thing in terms of the next step for him as a raw player is he does so many things great on the practice field and really fast, and he triggers and all these things. And then he gets to the game and he slows down a little bit, still mentally not quite there. I get that. So do you want him playing right now? No, you don't. I understand. But I think I am certain of this. By midseason, he will be my fourth favorite, at least, linebacker on this team. He is so talented, and he's going to figure it out. I really do think so.
Yeah.
But overall, I think this is the most interesting conversation of the entire depth chart in terms of the 53-man roster, because I think you can justify keeping 6 of these guys. And I'm not saying justify keeping all 6, but I think there are 6 guys you can justify keeping.
I had a strange thought this morning watching the game. And to your point, when you do the roster exercise, you do come up like 8 slots short. And you're like, there's no clear need on the team, in particular for a team that is not trying to win a championship. What is interesting to me is I thought, man, what if they don't feel like they have good options for a variety of reasons. I think Otis Reese was number 3 with a bullet on the linebacking core, but then he got hurt, and so I don't know what that does to his chances. Cedric Gray needs to be number 3, but is not. Chance Campbell, I agree with you, might be number 3 right now. James Williams might be number 3 in the future.
Right.
Like there's all there. So it's like, what if they just decide, hey, we don't have 2 great options here, but we've got like 4 okay options. Let's keep them all and see what comes out. Like, let's see what rises.
That's what I would do, Braden. If it's up to me, it's what I would do.
Especially if Gray's hurt, where you have to put him on PUP for 4 weeks because he's not going to be ready to start anyway.
Right.
I don't know if that's I don't know what the rules would be on that, but like I was starting to think this morning, like, I wonder if they just use those extra spots to try to fill it up with linebackers and see who works when the lights are on. Because they don't have answers right now at number 3, 4, 5, or 3 and 4. You could make the case compellingly for any of them. And I think
I'm not uncomfortable with if we flash forward to week 1 and suddenly Jack Gibbons pulls up with a tweaked ankle and you have to put in Chance Campbell. I'm not entirely uncomfortable with that at this point. I think in hindsight, we should have seen this coming. His athletic profile lends itself hand in glove to what a Denard Wilson defense wants to look like at that position. Is it redundant with a Kenneth Murray type? Yes. But I think all of these guys are kind of like, outside of Cedric Gray, who was my great white hope to be like, let's have somebody that can cover. Can somebody cover? He right now can't do anything. And so they're all redundancies.
The white part of that explanation is interesting to me, but
that I didn't mean to throw that word in there. I know that's usually the joke is great white hope. I meant just great hope, and then they made
Campbell and Reese are the 2 you want to be 3 and 4 right now. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, those are the 2. If one of your starters gets hurt week 1, you want Campbell or Reese to be ready to go to play right away. I don't think Williams or Gray or anybody else is ready to go. So now, in a pinch, could Denard Wilson get creative with a single middle linebacker? And then, yes, thank you, Stoney. Could Denard Wilson get creative with a single middle linebacker and rolling Molden or Adams up close to the line of scrimmage, or dropping Jalen Harrell into coverage more often to play a little bit more off ball? Like, they could get creative with it. But I do think what's fascinating to me, and this is where I think the edge rusher thing earlier, Easton, is similar. They're going to go into the next season with a couple of very obvious needs, the way they went into this offseason with obvious needs at receiver and offensive line. They systematically approach those needs. I think it is going to be very clear that they're going to go into the offseason with an outside and an inside linebacker issue that they're going to need to address in the offseason. If James Williams and Cedric Gray develop into something special by the end of the year, then they're okay there. But right now, they may not even have a number 1 middle linebacker or a number 2. They might have like 2 number 3s starting right now.
I slightly disagree with both of those statements. Only slightly, though. I'm 77% with you on both of those things.
You're Peter Skoronsky. All right.
Exactly. I am Peter Skoronsky with you on both of those things. Your point that they are going to go into next offseason with an issue, I disagree with, which you kind of clarified there at the end, saying if those 2 rookies pan out, if Jalen Harrell turns into like a starter, like a replacement level guy you can roll out there for 90% of the snaps, I still think you have a problem with that position. Like, you still don't have any depth. So I still see that as an issue. I do think at middle linebacker, there is a world, it's not a likely world, but there is a world in which they end the season and you feel way better about it. And you don't feel like it's a big need going in, but that's going to take Kenneth Murray working out, and or Chance Campbell making the leap, and or James Williams putting it together early, and or Cedric Gray working it out. It's a lot of ifs. And usually when there's a lot of ifs, it doesn't work out for you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. So middle linebacker, running back, I think receivers set, maybe extra tight end, extra running back, middle linebacker, extra guy, extra offensive line. There's some pieces to keep an eye on there. Certainly, they have to decide. I think it's pretty obvious that Mason Rudolph will be the number 2. They'll decide next week. Brian Callahan kind of clarified this by saying the only real question left is, do we keep 2 or do we keep 3?
Correct.
So that could also factor into this decision as well. Otherwise, I think corners fairly. I mean, Jarvis Brownlee gave up a big shot in that game where he got beat. But like,
can we talk about this for a second?
Trey Avery still gets beat most of the time,
like a drum.
So I mean. I'm a little concerned that we haven't seen the starting lineup out there much at all, but it is what it is. We knew Snead wasn't going to practice, so
I wrote about this as well in my article. The cornerback group, the difference between their 4 best corners and their next 4 corners couldn't be any. I mean, it is the Grand Canyon in terms of talent and confidence level. Trey Avery's starting to really bother me just because I feel like he's the kind of guy you need to churn. Like, let's skip. I understand
I'm he's going to personally offended by his existence.
Yes, it's offending my sensibilities because all he does in practice and in games is get torched by guys named Aesop, who you're not even a real person. So you need to be churning bodies behind him, and they're not going to because he is probably your 5th best option at this point. He's a veteran. He at this moment in time, I don't like it. I would like for guys like Gabe Jeudy-Lally to step up. And yet, man, watching him when he's playing man, it's like, yeah, there's flashes. I like that. I think there's something here. And then when he's playing zone, he is without fail lost or floating. Yeah. He doesn't know where to go. I don't know what to do with my hands is what he's doing out there. They
are so good in the starting 3 and probably 4 with Brownlee as soon as he kind of develops.
And then it's a nightmare.
But if they get hurt, boy,
it's going to get so ugly.
And neither of their starting corners has practiced more than a day. I think they were both out there one day, I think. So I don't know.
They're not great.
If they're healthy, they're very good. So that's what matters. Sinkers Beverages, make sure you go check them out. Of course, have that booze delivered directly to your house. Search Uber Eats. There you go. Easton Freeze.
Yep, they drive so you can drink is what they do.
There you go. Zach says
Zach's comment here.
Zach says Gabe Jeudy-Lally is a lock and clearly better than Trey Avery, but is he better than Tay Gowan? All right, so
Robert Javier.
Here's the question. Here's my last. So. First of all, I hope Mama and baby are doing well at home, and
they're good.
If we've never talked about it on the air, congrats.
Thanks.
How do you spell your daughter's name?
Valerie.
Okay, you didn't decide to put a bunch of extra Y's in there, right?
Goodness, no.
You
could have established this. I hate my own generation. I'm old school.
All the extra Y's are ridiculous.
Yes.
So on this logic alone, a kicker named Braden with a Y is not allowed on the team.
That's right. Braden Narvison.
I don't care if you kick 59-yarders and get multiple game winners. I don't care. You're not allowed on the team if your name is spelled incorrectly.
That's the rule, huh?
And Braden with a Y is technically, factually, objectively, logically incorrect.
How do you feel about Bradens that are like BRAE, that kind of deal?
Also feels superfluous.
Okay.
BRAIDEN. At least braid is a word. It's at least a word though. BRAID is a word. The Y is completely extra. The E in that situation is also a little bit just sort of extra.
Yeah.
The I is technically extra, but at least it's a word.
Mm-hmm.
At least it's ended. At least it's DEN and not DON, because that's also
Braydon.
Feels also pretty stupid.
What about Braden with an I?
I am. Oh, that's really bad.
Yeah.
We're getting worse. How's that possible? No, look, all kidding aside, this is not a competition. Nick Folk is your starting kicker. And it was nice to see a young kicker with a little talent do something in a game.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the Tennessee Titans need to do something about their kicker personnel that isn't signing a 35-year-old, because it seems like their strategy has been largely the same since Mike Vrabel took over, and now with Cal. Like, it doesn't matter who's been the general manager; they have not fixed this problem.
Well, would you trust Craig Ackerman to develop a kicker? Because personally, I would not have. So it made sense before, but now it's time.
I hear you,
the Colt Andersons. Let's get some development in here.
I hear you. I think you need, like, Brett Kern, Ryan Stonehouse. You find a guy long term, you keep him. They have not been able to find a guy and develop him long-term and keep him at this position. So is that an incorrectly spelled Braden Narveson? Maybe. Is that some other piece? Is that a draft pick? I don't know. But you can invest in this position that's not a 36-year-old AARP member. And that's not a knock on Nick Folk. He's like, they had a great season. Didn't they have one great season with Gostkowski? And then he was like bad after that? Or
yes.
I feel like they've
good season. Yeah.
They keep finding like a good season here or there from somebody, and that's fine. But like, you eventually have to find a guy for the long term. Eventually, it's not this year, but eventually.
Yes, and it's not Braden Narveson. Now, stick him on the practice squad. Like, I don't mind that. Everybody, I love this time of year because everybody's rationale in these arguments of whether to keep a guy or put him on the practice squad is, well, you can't put him on the practice squad. He'll get scooped up for sure. No, he won't. No, like that. In any case, usually the answer is no. They're not going to go anywhere. They're safe on the practice squad. I promise. With Narveson, everybody, I understand. It was very predictable watching that game, knowing how many folks at home have only seen Braden Narveson in this one instance, and he does what he does, and it's a cool moment, and it was impressive.
It's the Braden flu game. Always an important moment in life.
That's exactly. All I had to tell people afterwards was, I promise you, if you had been watching Braden all month and not just in this game, you would not be saying the things you'd be saying. And there's a reason why immediately after the game, head coach Brian Callahan is saying, no, what happened does not he's not pushing Nick Folk. Hey, also, by the way, Nick Folk is, I think, earning almost $4 million guaranteed this year. So it's not happening, guys. It's just, let's relax on that.
Just that note. So I wanted to agree with your point that it's Nick Folk's job, and that's it. That's the end of the discussion. But really,
your point is that it's based on the name,
but it's based on the spelling. Right. It's actually his parents' fault. Is actually what we're getting at here. And I wanted to applaud you.
Unbelievable.
And I wanted to applaud you and your better half for not spelling your daughter's name with 3 Y's, because you could
change your name to Vallyryy.
You could have done that, and you did, and you chose not to. Because you are a logical, rational, fully functioning adult.
Thank you.
So I do appreciate that. All right. I think that's about it.
Yeah, I'm about to say.
Hot Read Podcast, Sinkers Beverages, Football and Other F Words. Zach's back on Thursday. We'll preview the Saints game. This is a big week of practice for a lot of players trying to make that roster. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next Tuesday on Cut Down Day. The season is right around the corner. By the way, I know I had some folks asking about this. The Fantasy League has been re-upped for a football show. So all you folks that have been signed up, you're back in. If you want out, shoot me an email. We'll fill your spot. I know there's folks that want in on that. We're going to have a draft coming up, maybe half online, half offline, if we can get enough folks together. I know a lot of you are out of the market and out of the area, so we know that online works for you guys. But Hot Read Podcast, Broadway Sports Media, Music City Audible, Paul Karski Podcast. I don't just Lower Broad Hockey on Substack.
If you want into the football show, fantasy football league, by the way, and you can't get in, we'll probably have a spot for you over on the Hot Read one as well. So just you'll find you a 440 spot. They're out there. I promise.
There you go. Absolutely, We'll take care of you, and Sinkers will take care of you as well. If you need some booze, you need the party. You got something going on, you got an event, you need a bottle of wine for dinner, you name it, Sinkers Beverages has you covered. So make sure you check them out over in East Nashville, Bluegrass Beverages up in Hendersonville. Okay. Easton, thank you for giving us some time and for filling in for Zach. We do appreciate it. Friend. He will be back, of course, and 3 shows a week, right? On the Hot Read Pod Sunday.
That's right, baby. We're reacting
Thursday.
Weekend reaction time, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays in the afternoon. We will be live. Check us out.
There you go. Okay. Do appreciate you guys all listening and commenting. Thumbs up on YouTube. Share the product on Facebook, Twitter, etc. Everywhere else. We do appreciate you all for listening. We will talk to you guys on Thursday. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later.